Welcome to the Contemplative Science Podcast. My name is Jamie, and as always, I'm joined by co-host Dr. Mark Miller. Mark, how are you, man?
Hey, James. I'm doing very well, thanks.
So today our guest is none other than Dr. Eric Laux. Eric is a professor, researcher, and pioneer in the study of mindfulness and health. He is a director of the Mindfulness Center at Brown University and the author of The Mindful College Student, which came out this year. Eric, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, really nice to be here with you both, and I've been enjoying listening to your podcast and really appreciate the work that you're doing and spreading it around the world.
Oh, it's nice. What a nice thing to say. What a great way to start.
Also, we were speaking off air just briefly about the fact that it's the new school year, the new college year, the new university year. And that's contextual, because I want to spend a little bit of today talking about young adolescents. I heard a presentation you gave where you spoke about how young to youngish adults are dying what you've described as deaths of despair. Now, stress levels are going up, and the younger you are, the more stressed you are, very roughly speaking. And I wanted to ask you, what's going on?
Yeah, it's a challenging time to be a young adult, and we've been seeing, we've been running some analyses in nationally representative data from death certificates and stuff, and seeing that since 2009, mortality in young adults has gone up about 40%,
Wow.
And that trend was happening before COVID. And a lot of it is driven by what we call deaths of despair, suicide, overdose, accidents, homicide, and so what is driving that in the U.S. And if we look at mental health statistics for the last 30 years or so, we've been seeing steady increases before COVID, also after COVID. Increases in anxiety and depression, and about 7 years or so ago, a nationally representative study that tracks the stress levels of people in the United States for the first time in recorded history. The stress of young adults, actually of adolescents, was higher than that of adults, and so we're at a time in history where folks are stressed, and mental health is a real challenge, and that's also translating into mortality rates and stuff too.
Wow.
On the flip side, it's also kind of, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say it's uncanny, in every classroom that I'm in where I'm teaching anything on anxiety or resilience techniques. And I say, can we just get a show of hands just for solidarity? Who here has struggled with some sort of anxiety disorder? And I don't mean just feels anxious sometimes, but really has had a real challenge with anxiety. I mean, it's either the entire room or most of the room that put up their hands. Most people, it seems, in my life right now identify as somebody who has some struggles with anxiety sometime in their life.
Yeah. And it's this funny thing where it's this challenge, and it's also in some ways a really cool time to be a young adult, in that we're living twice as long now as we did just 100 years ago. So wow. Even if we're making a right mess of our lives right now, we got twice as long to sort it out.
You're getting twice the mess anyway.
Yeah. And it's also, I love teaching mindfulness to young adults, and it's also an interesting time physiologically where the brain is maturing, the prefrontal cortex is actually maturing in the mid-20s. And so it's a real chance to work with the brain right when it's starting to really get skills of logic and reason, and being able to connect itself to all the other regions of the brain as well.
So then the question is, why is it that on the paper it's a good time to be a young person? Why is that not translating into people's lived experiences?
Yeah. Well, as I was writing that book, The Mindful College Student, I interviewed a couple dozen young adults, and I've had hundreds go through my mindfulness-based college program and the courses that I teach. And so things that they talk about, some are related to, financial stress, for example. So college tuition has been outpacing inflation for decades. Housing costs have been outpacing inflation for decades. And And then this kind of gig economy and lack of kind of stable jobs a lot of the time create quite a bit of economic stress that students are feeling. Social media and sort of the drive of connection to screens and how to sort out their relationship with that, and also the implications of it around, say, body image, or how they may compare their everyday experience to people's best days that often show up on social media, and what that means for them. So those are some of the big ones, for example.
The interesting thing around like every single one of those, including the college and the housing, etc., is that they all emerged out of kind of cool things. Like social media, by itself in the vacuum, it's great. Like more room for connection. If house prices or education are going up, to be very reductionist, it means there's demand and there's education available. But it's so interesting that like good things without proper regulation, crafting, end up being, as you've described, some of the prime reasons young people are stressed.
Yeah. And how do we work with that?
So, a crucial detail here is, as we're talking about youngish people, your prefrontal cortex matures in your mid-20s. Can you explain what a prefrontal cortex is, what it is to mature, and why that matters?
Sure.
Nice.
Yeah. It's like the prefrontal cortex is the area that's responsible for like logic and reason. It's kind of near your frontal lobe, like kind of towards the front of your brain. And so, I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm a physiologist, but not necessarily a neuroscientist. But it's an area that really helps with say if a stress reaction happens, it might be hitting like our limbic system or our amygdala, like the fight or flight or freeze response. But as we get older, we start to get more connections and more development with that prefrontal cortex where there's logic and reasons, so that we can say, yeah, I'm feeling stressed, or yeah, there's this thing that's happening that I really want to do. Maybe it's not so good for my well-being. Oh, look, my prefrontal cortex that tells me more about logic and reason is actually more connected to my amygdala or my reptilian brain, and they can start to talk with each other more. And, in the neuroscience of mindfulness and meditation, one of the discoveries I found most interesting is showing increased connectivity between different regions of the brain. And so can we harness our entire wisdom? Like one of the definitions of mindfulness is, around remembering, and it's almost like mindfulness is like an arrow that brings our wisdom into the present moment. And so can we remember to bring all the wisdom wherever we got it from, whether it's from our parents or wise people in our lives or something we've read or whatever it is, can we bring it into this moment? And having that prefrontal cortex there that helps with the logic and reason can help us bring our wisdom right here, right now, because this is the only moment that we ever have.
I love that. It's one of the things that I like about using science as the basis for thinking through some of these things, is that just it just sounds, I think as soon as you say that out loud, you say, look, your brain's growing and there's some like really important growth periods. And by the way, we can actually train in a certain way to help that moment along and help it like have its full maturity. I don't know how anybody says, oh, that sounds like a terrible idea. I mean, you can take it out of the religious context in a way. You can just say, look, you've got a growing brain. Here's some skills that you can use. And these skills will help that period support you. I'm all right. I've already drank the Kool-Aid, but if I hadn't, I would have definitely just even hearing that.
Yeah. It can even be interesting to see for ourselves, for those of us who maybe are past that mid-20s age, or those that are entering. I had a friend when I was in college who talked about like the Saturn return, which I guess Saturn comes to the same place in the universe as when you were born, when you're 26. And I was like, that sounds like fluff. And it was like right when I turned 26 that I finally started like taking control over my life, and I felt like I became like a man, and like, and I was like, wow, that Saturn return thing, oh my God. And then I realized, and who knows, like I don't know, but I do know the prefrontal cortex matures right around then. So I certainly experienced the benefits of that personally, and around that time in my life too, where I really noticed, around that age, that I was like, okay, yeah, what do I want to do with my life? life, and how can I build the life of my dreams, and what is that dream in the first place? And I find mindfulness can help us come to understand ourselves better, come to know who we really are, and look at what's most important for the world and how we can meet that demand, leveraging our skills that we already naturally have.
It's interesting because I'm 25. I'm 26 in my Saturn's coming round for me.
Oh yeah,
welcome to it.
Okay, yeah, watch out, man. It's
hold on.
But it is interesting because the difference between 22, and I'm speaking just for myself, but kind of my friends as well, and 25 is big. Like the amount of stability that's in your life, not necessarily, but you've come out of being 18 and doing all that stuff. 25, 26, I'm not saying it's linked to Saturn per se, but I do understand there's a point to 26 being a little bit more settled. And one of the reasons, quite possibly that happens, is kind of the maturing of your prefrontal cortex. As you say, decision-making comes online just a little bit more, just a little bit mind, but a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I want to know, is that flexibility in the prefrontal cortex that exists from 0 to 26, does that represent something of an opportunity when it comes to mindfulness and developing brain training?
Yeah. It's a tricky time. It's like, when my kids, I have twin daughters, and when they were 6 months old, we started up this mindfulness group for families. And so we offered programs for everyone together. We might be singing songs or inviting a bell we'd each get a chance to ring the bell and we'd all listen to it, and might share a children's story that would have an adult lesson. And then we'd split off into different groups, and the kids would have kid programs and the adults would have adult programs, so that they really do something that's developmentally right for them. And then we come back together. And I've trained thousands of people in mindfulness meditation, and the most stressed I've ever been training someone in mindfulness is the kids, because they're so developmentally different. It was just whoever showed up, anywhere from basically 2 to 14. And so when the brain is developing, I've often heard of it as it's kind of like you're building a house, and you start with the foundation, which is the reptilian brain, and then start building up. But you got to remember, with kids and adolescents and stuff, that the top part of the brain isn't built yet. And so if we're going to work with mindfulness training for them, when is right to offer it and how? And so we're seeing, say, results from the Myriad project, like in the UK, that provided mindfulness training in school settings to I think it was 12 to 14-year-olds, somewhere around there, maybe it was 10 to 14. Had kind of mixed results. And so for me, I'm often thinking of how to do it in the right way at the right time. And so it's one of the reasons why I love working with young adults, because the prefrontal cortex in the brain is maturing, but it's also kind of plastic. And it's at the stage that they can really take it on. And also,
especially at college, where you really are stepping into a new kind of life in college, aren't you? I mean, you're already stepping into a lot of volatility, just leaving your primary home. You're kind of open to being bendy and a bit flexible when you get into college, I think.
Yeah. It's they call it a sensitive time in the life course, where people are often leaving home, finishing high school or whatever it is, moving on to the next stage, starting new romantic relationships, and just coming to figure out who they are. And that mindfulness training can help provide a framework and a scaffolding through which to figure that out, to be able to differentiate themselves from their parents, but still leverage the wisdom that they've learned from their parents, and to create a community of each other that's actually often a pretty healthy kind of community. Mindfulness is kind of a cool thing right now, and I find that a lot of the students that I teach form some social networks because they're into this stuff, but it's a pretty healthy way to connect with others.
Eric, can I ask, with your experience here, what have you found just in your own experience does work for people around this age to be developing some of these skills? Or, we were just saying there's a kind of, you're always thinking about optimizing how to deliver these things and how they might be taken up. I mean, where are you right now for thinking about around this age range of college starting to develop some of these skills and abilities? Is there any things that have really that seem obvious for you now with all of your experience?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I developed this program called Mindfulness-Based College that is grounded in mindfulness-based stress reduction. That's like an evidence-based program that's been around for over 40 years. But we adapted it to connect more with young adults' concerns and interests, so that everyone in there is a young adult. And then we bring in more topics, particularly related to like physical health, like young adults' relationship with their diet, with physical activity, alcohol, substance use, with social media. We also have more kind of peer-to-peer interactions because their peers are so important to them at that phase. And there's a lot of appreciation around that. So we ran that through a randomized controlled trial that was published in the journal Psychosomatic Medicine in 2021, like last year, and showed, pretty nice statistically significant improvements in depression symptoms and stress and sleep quality, and also in like sedentary activity, like the amount of time that people were spent in sedentary activities, and also overall well-being. So that's been pretty inspiring to see. Also, I teach a course called Meditation, Mindfulness, and Health at Brown, and we're just in the second week of it now. It's a very popular course. I cap it at 120 students, and it fills up in minutes. And
wow!
And so that gives the students a chance to both learn the practice of mindfulness. They get kind of a boiled down kind of mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based college program, but then they also learn about the science of mindfulness, so all the methods around study design and measurement, and really look at the state of the evidence on the impacts of mindfulness on various different health outcomes like obesity or anxiety or depression or blood pressure, or how to adapt it to different racial and cultural groups. And so they get the credit for that, and they learn the science of it, so they get sort of an objective view of how it works and if it works, and then they get to try it out for themselves as well. That's been a powerful combo.
Wow.
Do you find that students who take your courses or people who are reading your books are running into issues that are new fundamentally because of things like social media, money stresses, or are these different versions of the things that have been plaguing the mental health of people that age for the last 500 years?
I mean, I think suffering isn't new. But what causes the suffering of a population at any moment in time is, if we look at the causes of suffering, from a mindfulness framework or some of the Buddhist underpinnings, they talk a lot about the causes of suffering being attachment or craving, or aversion, like not wanting something to be the way it is, or ignorance. And so if we look at it around, say, social media use, we can think of, say, craving or attachment to whether people like our posts or not, or how we're viewed, how many people follow us, So sometimes we can boil it down to some of the fundamental causes of suffering, which are attachment, aversion, and ignorance. But at the same time, social media is pretty new, and it's this fancy, flashy little thing that our parents didn't really sort out, and their parents didn't really sort out. So it's just like with any tool that comes up in society, we need to figure out how to use that tool well. And so how can we use social media well? Because it's an amazing tool in so many ways, but we can get caught. And mindfulness can help us know when we're getting caught.
There's definitely an element of generational luck here. Each generation has its perks and pitfalls. But I know friends of mine or younger siblings who are 2, 3, 4 years younger than me are genuinely of a different generation, and their mental health and their relationship with social media is kind of almost by paradigm different, because what they've grown up with is totally different to what I've grown up with, which is bizarre to talk about in the context of 3 years. But it makes the point. The needs of college students, the needs of adolescents are actually changing rapidly, and one would presume quicker and quicker, which poses a practical problem for courses, for books, for looking after young people. How do we catch the new nuances of what we need to provide to be supportive.
Yeah, yeah. I think one approach is to be training the next generation in mindfulness practices, and then they become the teachers. And they get to see how it applies to their digital landscape or their financial landscape or their job landscape, because they're the experts, because they're the ones living it. But then also for me, I try to really connect with young adults and listen to them and understand, and to think of it as like, you know, I learn as much from them as they learn from me. And so then if we're in it together and we're connected, then the flow of ideas can go through the generations, but not in a like top-down kind of way, just as a mutually respectful, with lots of curiosity kind of way. Because it's, you know, like my kids, they're 12, and you know, they were doing this, they don't really do much in the way of games and stuff, but they were doing this, it's this app that basically is like Pictionary, where you like draw pictures and you kind of guess what the picture is. And like they're playing with kids from like India, like all over the world, and like, and then they're chatting with them, and they're getting some neat little snippets of people from other cultures, and like,
Wow.
how cool is that, you know? And so I'm trying, you know, even as a father, to like be like, wow, that's just amazing that you get to do this. And, you know, how's it going? Is it making you feel happy or less happy? And to, you know, support them with mindfulness practices to like not get caught in that, and make sure that they're taking care of their bodies and the minds with healthy eating and physical activity and other forms of social engagement with their family or friends. But we give them some time on that, because there's pretty amazing things that can be done. You know, they hadn't seen their grandparents for 2.5 years because of COVID, but we had Zoom and we had video conferencing, and that really helped them with missing their grandparents. And they finally got to see them in person this summer. And it was wonderful, and in person was wonderful. But boy, if we hadn't had video conferencing during Zoom, it would have been even harder for the grandkids and grandparent relationship.
So I want to move this briefly to early life trauma or early life adversity. Now, I'm just interested, ultimately, let me try that again. I'm interested to start in the differences between early life trauma or adversity and trauma and adversity experienced later in life, and whether there's anything fundamentally different going on.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you've read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, but it really addresses this kind of thing in a beautiful way. I'm actually reading it right now. I lead a network funded by the National Institutes of Health called the Reversibility Network, and it's looking to support research on how to reverse the effects of early life adversity in midlife. And we've been looking at, you know, mindfulness programs as one option, but also say physical activity as another, and you know, psychological therapy can be another approach. You know, I think if we think of trauma early on in life, that can happen before the brain is fully developed and the body's fully developed, and there can be real power dynamics there as well, so that responses can be made to that trauma where kids are just doing the best they can to figure out how to be well, and decisions can be made that can influence their well-being that they sometimes don't even know they made, and it can get pretty deeply wired because the brain's just getting going with getting developed. In adulthood, when trauma happens, it can be in a more, you know, you might have had some of those neural networks already developed, so that if the trauma happens, it can be really difficult and damaging, but you've got the full brain there to be able to make sense of it and to recover. And not to say one is harder than the other, but that's where I see, you know, some of the differences kind of from a physiological level come about. And also sometimes with the childhood trauma, they might not even know that it happened because it just happened so early in life and stuff. But it's influenced the way that they are now.
That's an interesting detail, right? Like once you're older, you can contextualize things that happen to you. and you can talk about them, and you kind of have a narrative to make sense of it. Whereas something happens earlier, before you're kind of at the point where you're putting together conscious narratives. Well, maybe you just assume that that just gets built into the system by the sounds of things. And then the reversibility network, let's talk about it. What's the way to start recovering?
Yeah. So, some of the work, my colleague Shufeng Sun, who's a professor at Brown University, published a review on this topic just last year, and I'm on the authorship too, but she really led the project, and so looking at mindfulness as an approach, say with mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, there's been a couple studies now. One published in the Lancet by Willem Kuyken at Oxford University, he's the lead author, and found that those who were exposed to childhood abuse had bigger impacts of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy on depression than people who weren't exposed to childhood abuse, for example. And there's this idea, Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Zen master, talks about using mindfulness meditation to heal the past in the present moment, so that it can help us kind of take a step back from, say, our emotions or our thoughts, and to care for them, almost like a parent would a crying child. And they're just there. They're there for a reason, and and there's lots of causes and conditions that went into that event that happened. And can we care for the emotions that arise? And then after time, kind of like how a child will settle when we're there with them, we can start to look at the roots of what maybe caused that, but to really offer lots of self-kindness and respect our boundaries, so that if we're in a comfort zone or like a growth zone, there might be some stress there looking at the roots, but we're not overwhelmed. It's okay, and we can continue. But if we get overwhelmed, we might want to, say, distract to something healthy, like just going for a walk or whatever it is. David Treleaven wrote a really beautiful book called Trauma-Sensitive Mindfulness that really looks at how to consider trauma history when we're working with mindfulness practices. And so if we do it gently and with skill, and preferably with a skilled teacher, it can help us start to take a step back from those strong emotions and thoughts and be able to look at the roots. And once we understand the roots, often a skillful path for healing appears.
I love that right there. And just to hit the note one more time, I think oftentimes when we think about the benefits of mindfulness for these things, we think that it's mostly the non-judgment, but that's actually only half of the story, and maybe not even half of the story. The other half of this story is investigating the roots and coming to a better understanding. I've just heard that in this conversation we're having right now. Like you said, like as an adult, we've got fully fleshed out neural networks. We have much more capacity to be able to digest and understand the sort of things. Well, hopefully we have a bigger capacity to understand and digest the sorts of things that happen to us. But when you're younger, you don't have the same capacity to understand. And I think that understanding is so crucial for what ends up getting in and counting as trauma and what doesn't. Oftentimes, just really understanding how something is and understanding our own relationship to it, that takes a lot of the teeth out of a lot of the sort of dangerous experiences that we go through in a lifetime. So I just love to hear you say it here, that the mindfulness element here is not just dispassion, is not just non-judgmental perception, but it's non-judgmental perception so that you can get close enough to the thing so that maybe you can learn something about the thing in a caring and considered way, and that it might be the learning that helps. And does that sort of track with your feelings here as well?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the neat things with the reversibility network is, looking into the measurement of adversity too, because there's lots of different kinds. Yeah. And so two big categories of adversity. One is kind of like abuse, and the other one is like neglect. And
interesting.
There's
so like actively disrupting, or staying back while you're being disrupted. You either don't feel supported or you're actively being damaged. Yeah, that does seem like two big categories.
And so there's like Katie McLaughlin, I think is her last name. She's at Harvard University. And some of our colleagues have like really measured the physiology of this and stuff too. So, and we're just running some analyses right now in our mindfulness-based blood pressure reduction study where we measured these two domains. And so what we're seeing so far, again, this is unpublished and hasn't been peer reviewed yet, and we're still running the analyses, so take this with a grain of salt. But we're finding that for those who are exposed to abuse, that we're seeing the stress-related pathways, like say the mindfulness impacts on stress being particularly pronounced. And on those who experience neglect, we're seeing more impact like through dietary behaviors and stuff too. So when you can think of folks who had neglect during childhood and they might not have received enough. And so including potentially enough food, for example, too. And so that they might be responding in ways to just get enough. Whatever it is that can translate into adult. They find that, for kids that were low birth weight or like who went through a famine prenatally, like when they're in their mom's wombs, they're more likely to be obese in adulthood. And so can be these kind of set points to say, just, make sure you're getting enough food, and that sometimes we can overcompensate. And so it's been interesting to kind of see the pathways come out.
I love this, like starting to find the family members of suffering, and then start thinking about how they reverse in the myriad ways, and then interlocking that with the sort of skills and abilities that tend to be cultivated in mindfulness type vehicles. It's great. Wow.
Mm. Yeah. Thanks.
There's really something coming through here about like all of these practices require context. You spoke about trauma-sensitive mindfulness. Can you just describe what non-trauma sensitive mindfulness looks like in practice? If somebody's had a traumatic event and you jump in a way that's non-sensitive.
Yeah. So like say, at Brown University, we have a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher training program, like a certificate program, and we just added a new module that's actually open and available to any kind of mindfulness-based program teacher, and it's called the ethos of mindfulness-based programs. And we get into the science, but we also get into the trauma sensitivity and the diversity, equity, and inclusion elements, as well as the contemplative underpinnings of it. And so we really try to bring in the trauma sensitivity into the mindfulness teacher training. And so say, for example, with a lot of basic meditation training, we encourage people to be there with the breath, because the breath is here with us every moment of the day. And it can change a little moment to moment. It kind of connects the body to the mind, because it's the air is coming in through the head and but entering into the body. And so there's got a lot of benefits of the breath. And some people have had traumatic experiences with their breath, so whether they have asthma or they've maybe had a drowning experience or whatever it is, and the breath isn't a safe place to be. So here we are saying, just be with your breath and make that your anchor point. It's with you every moment of the day. And they're like, it's not working for me. And so we offer alternative anchor points, so that we offer the breath and encourage the breath if it's a place of safety, because the most research has been done there. But there's other anchor points that have been used for centuries too. And so, for example, you could use like the palms of the hands or the soles of the feet, like the sense of, say, touch or warmth or coolness or moisture, dryness, and just be there with the sensations of a particular part of the body that isn't necessarily the breath. And another option, if the body isn't a place that people feel safe with, you could go with sound or lack of sound and be there with the raw elements of sound, like how loud or soft is it? Is it rhythmic, arrhythmic? Is it close? Is it far? And so all of those anchor points are also with us every moment of the day, and can be used as a grounding meditation. So that's sort of an example of being trauma sensitive, where we offer alternative anchor points, or so that's just like one example, but there's other examples too.
One of the interesting things there is you said the breath might not be a safe place to be, and it's interesting that trauma is stored in the way that it's stored, right? So you'll associate hyper-focus on the breath as, oh my God, the traumatic event is become relevant in front of mind again. And when you consider the trauma can be psychological, physical, and meditation is some combination of both, of course, it makes it really obvious you need to be trauma sensitive, because meditation is taking quite a hard look at the body and the mind, And lo and behold, lets trauma happen,
Yeah.
the body and the mind. And me and Mark speak often. It's probably the thing we come back to the most as a theme. Is I think everyone who gets into meditation has either themselves or knows people who have gone in with a certain type A energy, it could be the gym, but it's meditation. It's like, let's go. And conversations like this just make that point again around meditation is slightly too subtle a game. It's too close to the bone. We're really focusing on our bodies and our minds to approach it that way. And this conversation around trauma is making that point again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like causes of suffering or attachment, aversion, and ignorance. So if you go in with attachment to an outcome, like I'm going to be an awesome meditator, or some kind of craving or grasping towards that future thing that we imagine that isn't actually here right now, the world's going to teach us some lessons around how that goes. And then sometimes if we just are, then suddenly those things kind of fall away in their importance, and we find a path through.
What's like the single gentlest, if someone's listening who's tried something vaguely like trauma sensitive meditation before, but is still thinking, shit, that's too scary, what is, if it does exist in your mind, like a fairly safe bet for like a entry-level trauma-sensitive form of meditation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so one thing is the evidence is still emerging, like around adverse events and stuff, but my feeling on it, and I still want to see the evidence get stronger, is that meditation probably isn't for everyone. And so if we're feeling like it's not a good time to meditate, to trust our wisdom around that. And because there's many paths to health and happiness, and sometimes we might want to start with, a talk therapy, for example, or some kind of somatic work. And if we feel like our body and our mind are telling us, like, let's try meditation, working with a skilled teacher, I find, can be really good. Especially if we have some kind of trauma sensitivity or past. And so if you can find a skilled teacher online or in your community to work with them bit by bit, sometimes it's a therapist that uses like an approach like acceptance and commitment therapy, for example, is like a pretty strong evidence, a mindfulness-informed approach. So those might be ways through, or dialectical behavior therapy is also pretty trauma sensitive that can be used in clinical settings. And if you want to just try something that's like trauma sensitive, Willoughby Britton's done some research showing that probably focused attention meditation is better than like what we call open monitoring at the beginning for people that have like high levels of stress or depression or anxiety. So that is finding an anchor point that's of benefit, and working with that. My meditations that I offer online are trauma sensitive, and I have focused attention ones that use those alternate anchor points. So if you just Google my name and meditation, I'm on all the major platforms, whether it's Spotify or iTunes or YouTube or Insight Timer. So you're welcome to do that. No pressure. But another piece is just finding a teacher that's a good fit for you, and I may or may not be that fit. And there's others. Also at the Mindfulness Center, we have just about daily free mindfulness meditations taught by certified teachers that are trained in trauma sensitivity. So if you just go to brown.edu/mindfulness center and click on our programs, you can see our daily programs that are available free and online.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting because Mark, you often speak about people in the communities. Oh, sorry, my mic's just gone flying.
That's okay.
Mark, yeah, you occasionally speak about people in your communities double wielding, right? So meditation is one of the tools, but then there's some kind of other activity, be it talking therapy, whatever else, and you speak fairly often about kind of the effectiveness of that double approach.
Yeah, I mean, I exactly right. Mindfulness can do a lot. I think it's really valuable. I think the skills, the toolbox that you get from those training programs are wonderful. And, we're talking a lot about mindfulness like it's one thing, but actually there are a lot of tools in that box, and they are variably interesting and important and impactful for different personality types in a myriad of ways. And, but I've always been a big proponent of kind of therapy and mindfulness at the same time. I sort of suspect all humans should be in therapy. I think we should probably all just find a therapist that we really love and that feels like we're supported by them, so that we just have somebody to talk things out with and to check in with, who has no buy-in other than our well-being, hopefully has no buy-in other than our well-being. But I love that dual wielding, because you can use mindfulness to get a better look at what's going on under the hood. And then you've got at least one good touch point where you can show up and say, look, this is what's going on under the hood. What do you think? Yeah, indeed.
I've definitely found in my own experience that when you're meditating, the particular resistances that come up, be them verbal resistances, like thought patterns that you can actually hear, or anything else, actually end up being quite good feedback for what you might want to bring into a therapy session.
Exactly.
It's
right.
Almost like going quiet. You don't have to listen that hard for your subconscious to start going, psst,
yeah.
I'm over here.
Indeed.
Yeah, I remember I had a student in my meditation, mindfulness, and health class a couple of years ago who, during one of the meditations, had a memory come up and realized that she really needed support, and that she needed to talk it through, and that a mindfulness class isn't always the best venue for that kind of thing. So
yeah. She
connected with the therapist and found that they, as both of you are sharing, they were sort of mutually reinforcing each other. And so there's many, it's like using this collection of tools to help support our well-being and what is our body and mind sharing with us in terms of what we need to promote that.
Yeah.
And to act.
Yeah, it's amazing. You think that mindfulness is going to somehow be an easy path, but it's not always an easy path, because what happens when you become more mindful is you learn more about yourself. And those aren't always easy things to know, that a lot of times it was ignoring parts of ourselves that was sort of getting us through the day. But I think, like we're saying here, long-term health asks us to understand more about ourselves. I remember one of my very first retreats, I didn't know I had an anger problem until I started practicing in a more ongoing and persistent way. And I remember the exact moment I realized I had an anger problem is a monk was walking behind me in a retreat center, and I thought, that's a big monk. If he wants to come fight me, what would I do? Like, how best to fight that big monk? And then it was the first time I caught myself with this underground conflict system on that was always checking to see, if I get into a conflict, how would I resolve it? If I had to fight them, if I had to fight for my life, if I had to defend myself in this way. So it's not really an anger issue. It's more like a vigilance issue. I was so surprised. I was like, who was thinking that? I'm in this beautiful, idyllic Buddhist retreat center. He's a professional, peaceful man. I mean, he's just walking behind me. There's no problems here. And meanwhile, some part of my subsystem is like, yeah, but if we had to get in a fight, I mean, what's the best way to take that monk down? Yeah. What a surprise. What a surprise.
Yeah.
Now, it is just worth saying that, like, the noise of our short-term goals and conflicts and anxieties make just being a human a fairly noisy place to be. And some of the things that are very, very obviously driving your behavior under the hood, the things that are really turning the key mechanics, it's amazing that we just can't hear them unless we're quiet. Like, Mark, if you look at your life retrospectively from the moment you realise, there's plenty of evidence, I'm sure, you can point back to and go, oh yeah, to be fair, I am always thinking, am I wanting to fight that guy?
And it's brutal. Like, nothing worked in my life until I figured that out, because I kept getting into altercations and I didn't know why I kept getting into altercations. And the reason was because I was highly expecting to be in an altercation. So I was always turning the volume up on those situations, and I was always preparing to defend myself in those situations. It's exactly the kind of thing that can magnetize those situations. And it wasn't until I learned that was I able to start applying the medicines that were valuable, which is why loving kindness practices, like actively cultivating empathy and compassion and loving kindness, have been so crucial to my own sort of integrative process over my life. But that started first by taking that bitter pill the mindfulness brought me, which is you've got a serious problem with vigilance and conflict. So uncomfortable at the beginning, but really valuable over time.
I was talking with a student yesterday who's in my course, but he's had a fair bit of mindfulness training himself and works with anxiety. And he's talked about through his mindfulness training that he doesn't necessarily feel like his anxiety symptoms have gotten better. They're just not running his life anymore. And that's one of the things, like with acceptance and commitment therapy, where it's kind of like we're not trying to push down who we are. We're just not letting some of the challenging pieces like drive the car anymore. Like they're sitting in the back seat.
Yeah.
And they can still come along for the ride. It's okay. No. But we're driving the car. And I thought he really showed a lot of wisdom with that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Learn that they don't take up the whole system. It's just a part of the system. It's okay if it's part of the system. It doesn't take up the whole thing. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like they talk about decentering with mindfulness, so that we're learning to take a step back and like observe our thoughts and emotions, kind of like we're watching a TV or something, and it's just, there it is coming across the screen. And just taking that step back can help us see that it's just a thought and that we don't necessarily have to act on it. So that if we have some thought or emotion like around vigilance or anxiety or whatever it is, it's just a thought. It's there for lots of reasons. Some of them are probably genetic, some of them are environmental. It is what it is, and we don't necessarily have to act on it unless our wisdom in this moment is sharing that we should act on it, and then act on it.
Yeah.
Eric, in your life, have you had moments where you caught a habitual thought pattern during the process of mindfulness or meditation?
Yeah, I mean, I put this story, I think, in my book too, but like when I was a teenager, I raced in triathlons a fair bit, and I think that was one of my entryways into mindfulness, because I would do these, 2.5 hour races. So I'd have to monitor my body and mind for quite a period of time, and it's like a solo sport. And so sometimes I'd be going too fast or too slow, or my mind would wander. And so I remember this one time in a race where my mind wandered to my girlfriend, and she'd been telling me about this guy he's like in our class, and he'd been coming over to her house in the evenings and kind of like hanging out, and kind of felt like he was like interested in her. And like, I've been dating her for like a year, like we're pretty serious. And so I started thinking about this guy, and I just noticed I was hammering up this hill on my bike, like going way too fast for a 2.5 hour race, because I was getting ready to like punch this guy kind of thing, or at least talk to him. And so I caught it, I caught the thought, and I'm like, I'm making note of this. And I actually ended up, talking to him the next week. But in the middle of that race was not the time to be fussing on it. And it was affecting my performance and my well-being. So I was able to catch it and come back to this moment, to this race, to this bike ride, and this actual beautiful environment I was on, and enjoy that while making the note that was important, and I would address it at the appropriate time, and this was not the appropriate time. So that kind of catching, I think, was actually some of my foray into mindfulness and meditation practice. It just happened to be through sport.
It's really interesting that you had an example there where the train of thought, you could see the immediate impact because you were in a high pressure physical situation where you're like, I only have so much metabolic resource. I can't be wasting it right now on this thing that I can't do anything about anyway, because the outcome will be I'll fail in this race. I might get sick. I'm going to throw up. I'm going to bail, whatever. What's less obvious in your day-to-day life is that that's also true just in our ordinary non-race life, right? You have a limited amount of metabolic resources. You can, if you keep feeding negative habitual thinking patterns, exhaust yourself, and then you're going to have a challenging time finishing the race of life. Very valuable, I can see, seeing that in a sports situation, because it really is obvious that you need to just let that go in order to finish the race. A little bit less obvious in our everyday life, but a really good a really good reminder.
Yeah, thanks.
Eric, where can everybody find you online?
I do have a website, ericlauxphd.com. That's maybe a good starting place to kind of get a sense of what I'm up to. My Twitter handle's at Eric B. Laux. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. So those are some of the pathways. If you want to listen to my meditations, I find Insight Timer app seems to be a particularly good platform, but I'm on a lot of different ones. So.
Eric, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, really, you ask great questions and also both have a lot of knowledge and wisdom in this area too. So it was a pleasure to connect with both of you, and thanks for all your good work that you're doing.
This has been the Contemplative Science Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, we'll be back next week.